Hey there. So I'm Lars. Just doing a little bench. This is you might have seen a couple of clips earlier of when I'm doing this. A good friend of mine, old friend of mine, gave me some beautiful 2-inch thick slabs of juniper, and this is just it's just fantastic, beautiful old wood. And anyway, I'm making. It's basically he's got a what's called a mill, so he makes his own. He can cut his own lumber and that kind of stuff. So anyway, this wood I am routing. This wood is actually 1 7/8 inch thick, which is close to 2 inches, and I got a bunch of it. So here's a. This piece is 50 inches long, 50. And then I'm going to, I'm now routing 2 slits here so that my final leg, which I'm going to be doing next, they'll fit right into this groove here. This is a thickness, so it's going to be nice and snug, and that'll help to give a little more support. I'm going to have 2 of these, a leg here and a leg here, and then I'm going to connect them with another piece like this here. That will give it stability, give the legs a lot of stability. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm just going to stop talking and I'm going to finish routing this here, and then I will get on with making the legs. Safety first. This is very loud. So this is the sawdust that I've created. I'll keep that for future use. Put that right in here. Okay, so here I've finished routing that one groove, and after going back and forth at different passes, there were a couple of little pieces of wood that hadn't quite routed out. So that's why you see me kind of
monkey around with it, trying to get everything all out. And then I took the square and laid it on there because I want to make sure that this is a nice, clean, flat groove that I've routed. Because this wood is, it's not, it may not be perfectly flat because it's been sitting around for a while, drying and all that kind of stuff. So my concern was if I fumble along and the wood is not even, then when I cut a groove, the groove won't be uh, it's flat. It will be up and down, and then that'll be not the best way to connect and glue the legs. So that's why I did that with a square. I don't care that it's square, I just want it to be flat. So it turns out that this wood is actually very straight, and I'm very happy with the routing that I've done on that insert, I guess you call it. And the reason for that, the insert is to give the legs, first of all, more surface area when I'm gluing the legs on, and because it sits into a groove, it's less likely to wobble back and forth. And I went in probably halfway into the plank, which is a little more than I actually wanted to. I want to go in maybe 3/4 of an inch. I think I went 7/8 of an inch, but that doesn't really matter. But I wanted enough groove to where it would make a difference. And certainly the increased surface area for the gluing is super important. That's always a thing when you're gluing joints. The more the surface area you have to glue, the stronger the connection and where the joint is. It's really important. So the next section of this video involves me trying to sort of center the legs on the grooves. And it happens to be that on this slab here, it's not square. You'll notice that if you look toward the right side of the screen, that side of the bench is significantly thicker in width than what I'm measuring right now. So I was trying to, the next couple of minutes will involve me trying to figure out, okay, where do I want the legs to be? Because I would like to have them somewhat centered so that the center of mass is increased. Because if I have the legs in the slot toward the front of it, then the center of mass is on the front. And you want to try to make it the most stable. So that's why I'm measuring in. Like, okay, do I want to go in 3 inches, 4 inches? Where do I want to start uh, each leg? Because the legs are always also not the same width. So that's why I'm kind of monkeying around to see, okay, where do I want it? Because I would like to have the piece that connects both of them somewhat near the middle of each leg, which will give most strength. And I had also considered putting in that connecting piece, which you'll see later in the video. Maybe set it back a little bit from the front so that maybe a shelf could be placed, or I could put that in there and then we can put things on there like flower pots or whatever. But as it turns out, I didn't. It's still a little back. It isn't completely right in the middle, but I'm really happy with how it turns out, and you'll see that later. Okay, so now I am still doing some checking here on the routed grooves. Again, that's to make it legs more stable. And right now I'm trying to figure out what width boards I want to use for the legs, because the wood that I'm planning on using is not they're not like square pieces, or they're all not the same width. And you can see me kind of measuring. I'm trying to figure out the center of a board that has two different widths. So I'm trying to figure out if I can split the difference between the wider end and the narrow end and come up with some sort of a middle ground for my supporting piece that will go between the legs and help support the piece that you're sitting on, the main piece. Okay, so now we have the piece of wood that I'm going to use to make the two legs. I'll call them legs, right? That's what I'm calling the end pieces. So this was an extra or an additional piece of wood that I got from my friend. He gave me a number of pieces, and trying to use them in a way that would maximize their use, I guess, their length and their qualities and everything. Because not every piece of wood is going to be used for this, what I need because of their size or the length or maybe the look that it have. This happens to be the one that would work well. You see, at the top, of like where my head is and above, that's a fairly skinny piece of wood that I'm going to use for some sort of wall decoration, I think, because it really looks cool, like a little shelf or something. So I'm going to reserve that for another project. But for now, I am doing a little tinkering with my tape measure to figure out how I can cut the end pieces, maximizing the strength and still retaining the beauty and the uncut bark pieces of the board that just looks really cool. Now, something to keep in mind. Let's say a person were making a bench using what we call dimensional lumber. So if you go to your lumber store, your big box store, whatever, and you just want to make a little bench, a little square bench or something, the wood is going to be it's called dimensional. It's been cut to certain lengths. Like for example, let's say a 2x4 is not 2 inches by 4 inches. It's 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches. Now, years ago, and it's a whole other video that could be dedicated to why that's done or why it's done that way. But if you have older houses, and our house is 136 years old, the lumber that was used back then were 2x4s. They were actually 2 inches by 4 inches and 2x8, 2x12, and all that stuff. But then later on, I don't know, was it the turn of the century or when it was exactly, they sort of nominalized or made very uniform sizes of lumber. And so now these days, make a long story short, the 2x4 is 1.5 inches by 3.5, and the 1x2 is 3/4 inch by 1.5 inches, and so on. But anyway, that not to get off subject, but because these are what's called raw edge planks, I think that's one of the terms they use. They just you just take a tree and you mill it. You put it on a milling machine, or if it goes through a sawmill or wherever, and they just cut the width of that they need. In this case, it's 1 7/8, but we'll call it 2 inches. It's very close to 2 inches, and you get a board out of it, and the next board is going to be different. Is going to have a different width because it's not a square piece of wood. If trees grew square like Legos, they'd all be they'd be square on the ends. But here you can see there's a beveled because around is the tree is round and you cut it straight. The front of one side of the board is going to be a little different width than the other. I mean, it's kind of apparent when you're looking at it. It's obvious. But so one of the issues that I'm dealing with here is the strength of the board. Even though one side of the board may have more wood, the other board might have this strength because you got to pretend like it's a dimensional lumber, like the sides are cut square when you're figuring out how do I want to cut this? What wood do I need, and what is just sort of for looks? In this case, a lot of the edge that you see facing the camera uh, may be sticking out toward the camera, but it's not really adding a lot of strength, kind of the way it is. There's a couple of pieces on here on one of the legs that has like a big, I guess you call it a burr or a part of a branch or beginning of a branch, whatever that was broken off or cut off or grew off or whatever. And it doesn't add a lot of strength, but it's a piece of wood. It's not something you'd want to sit on or stand on because it would just crack. So what I'm trying to do is maximize like I said, the strength to fit in what I'm trying to do. Now I have the main part or the sitting part of the board has that same thing too. Where it's a different size. So um, there's a couple of different unique, fun little challenges or issues that I'm dealing with. If it was just dimensional lumber right from the store, like I mentioned, it'd be easy. Boom, boom. This is the width of the board, and this is what you do, and here you are. So it makes it a little fun and exciting to try to figure out where's the middle of the board as far as strength. And so uh, that's kind of what I'm looking at. Now, it's a good time to mention some of the equipment that I use. What you see here is a Skill. That's the name of the brand, Skill. Uh, Circular saw, and it's what's the type of the saw is called a worm drive. Now, this is not a saw that the average homeowner or consumer is going to use. This is what you would call an industrial uh, contractor grade saw. What makes it so different than a normal little saw that you pick up in a big box store or a retail store or something is that this has a tremendous amount of torque for the blade. So that means that it can give a lot of power and still have a lot of and deal with a lot of resistance in the wood. So let's say the wood is wet or it's hardwood. Uh, a smaller saw would have would have difficulty, or it'd be more of a challenge to cut through it because it doesn't have the torque. And most of the saws that you would pick up in the store has what we call direct power drive. That's what I call it, where you have the motor and there's a shaft that is driven off the motor that gives you the power that's connected right to the blade. So you're going along, cutting a piece of wood, all of a sudden you run into a knot or something, which is very hardwood. It's going to give you more resistance, and that saw may not be able to handle so well the resistance, and it will just stop, or it'll lock up in the wood or something, and then if that happens, then you either damage the saw or the breaker will pop electrical in your electrical panel because you don't have the power to cut through it. Well, a worm drive saw is a different technology that involves kind of a gear, like a transmission, I guess you call it, except you can't, you don't just change it. That is, you don't change the gears, but the power goes in one direction, or the shaft, then it goes in and it takes a right turn or a 90-degree angle to go to the blade. And the way that it's designed, it gives you a lot of torque. Has a lot of power. So this saw here is able to handle more. It gives you more amps. It gives you more power. But when it comes up to the little knot or something like that, as opposed to the other saw that I described, it'll cut right through it, or it can handle the resistance without hurting the saw. And that's why this would be considered an industrial or a contractor grade saw. Because if you do this all the time, you need a saw that's just going to be able to handle large cuts. Let's say you're what we call ripping. Let's say you have a 2x8, which is 1.5 by 7.5 inches, and you want to cut it right down the middle. Well, then you want to have a saw that's able to handle. That's a lot of wood to cut through. And I have had this saw. Oh, just FYI, I just cut the first leg here while I'm rambling on about tools. But I've had this worm drive for many decades, several decades, and I've used it on my house and all kinds of things. It's very powerful. It's considerably heavy. It's much heavier than a little circular saw you can buy at Home Depot or whatever. But yeah, I'm thinking you can buy these at Home Depot, but most people don't because they're so heavy, and maybe they don't need the strength and the durability. This saw, you could throw it off the rooftop of my house, hit the ground, and it would probably not do anything to it. Most saws, if you did that, they would break into a million pieces, and you gotta go buy another saw. But at any rate, my older brother, years ago, when we bought our house here, he goes, you might want to get one of those contractor grade saws because it'll last, and if you're going to do a lot of projects, it's the way to go. And if you have a strong arm, and back then, my arm was strong, I can still handle it, but it is heavy, and it's quite a tool. I do have other saws. This happens to be my only worm drive. I only need one. My other one, I have a DeWalt cordless. It's a smaller blade, but it's so handy because I can hold it easily, and if I'm at different angles over my head or whatever, you use that. I also have a small skill saw, which is like a 9-inch, not a 9-inch, it's like a 5-inch blade, really small, and that's used for kind of the same thing as here, except just really light stuff, and it's also electric. But I do end up using my DeWalt almost for everything now because it's so convenient. I have lots of tools that are cordless. Almost every tool that I have now, reciprocating saw, hacksaw, of course my drills, screwdriver, and sanders, and all that stuff. Anyway, so the reason I'm using this saw here is because it's such a nice, clean, easy cut. This is thick wood, and it's also it's not hardwood, but it's old growth. If you can't quite see it, but I tried to count the rings, and it's not possible. This is such an old growth that the rings are really close together. That's how you can tell you have really old wood. It tends to be much stronger. The new wood that you buy, the brand new wood that's been cut or lumbered or whatever, milled recently, tends to be a much faster growing trees. That's because you can grow more trees quickly if that's all you're trying to do is to sell wood. But these old growth, like the wood that my house is built in with is super strong, super hard. There are planks and stuff in my basement. If I wanted to put a nail in there, even a big nail, the nail will bend if I'm hammering it. I have to actually pre-drill to nail in there for the big nails because the wood is so hard. It's beautiful wood, and it's really good for construction. So anyway, this is a bench. It isn't like I'm going to be putting 5,000 pounds of weight on this, but it could handle it maybe. I don't know about 5,000, but at any rate. So here I am. I have now, the other saws. So I have the little teeny one, the little skilled, and I have son has one which is again direct drive one which has a little laser on it, and it's one thing also to mention, and I don't know, I haven't figured this out. I've talked to contractors, I've talked to places that sell tools. I'm right-handed, and so when I cut with a saw, I like to see what I'm cutting. I want to, it's safer to see what you're doing than not. So what I have is technically what they call left-handed saw, but I and this is something I can't figure out. Uh, when I'm cutting the saw, as you saw, the blade is on the left. So if I want to cut, it's right there. Now, most of the saws that you buy are what I called, I don't like them. I call them left-handed because if you pick them up and you cut, you can't. You have to peek over the saw to see the edge to see where the blade is cutting, and I've always felt that's dangerous and inconvenient and wrong and all that, but that's how most of the saws are, and I think that's crazy. But maybe that's because I got used to being able to handle cutting with such a heavy saw. That for a while, this was for many years. This is the only saw that I have, though, my only circular saw. So you get real good at using it. Uh, the only time that I use my saw and I have to sort of that I use it kind of the way it was designed in one sense is if I have to cut, like here, let's have to cut a piece and it needs to be very exact as far as being square. When you're cutting a piece of wood and you're relying on the sort of the plate that the saw sits on, that will give you a really nice stable position to go ahead and cut your wood. Then it's going to be at a right angle. I'm used to just doing it so much that when I cut a board, I usually cut it sort of the opposite way of what kind of the way the saw was because I've learned to be able to cut very accurately with my saw that way. Anyway, getting back to the bench. So here I'm doing some more tweaking, trying to figure out, well, where's the middle going to be? How am I going to fit it into that groove? How wide, or where shall the piece that connects the two legs, where shall that go? I'm kind of rethinking these things as I go along based on how the wood's going to fit in and what's up and what's down. So here, now I'm going to cut the second leg, and I got some music playing, so I bouncing up and down a little bit, but that music is muted, especially so I can talk about what's going on here. So I'm using the material, the heavy material that I have there on the bench as sort of like a workbench. Why take out workbench when you got one stand right there? And I use that deck many, many times as sort of like a workbench because it's out in the open if I have long pieces or heavy stuff, whatever. I'm just using clamps here, that counter lever to keep the wood from falling off while I'm putting a lot of weight. That saw probably weighs, I don't know, 15, 20 pounds. So I'm getting ready here to do that sawing. So as I mentioned, the challenge here, and it seems like I'm spending a lot of time there's not a whole lot of activity going on, but I'm trying to figure out what I want it to look like, and where's the strength of the wood that I need and trying to get as much use out of the beautiful wood that I have. Unfortunately, I haven't had to really cut very much off. In fact, I don't think I have. I'm pretty much using the wood as it is. There's a piece a little later on, you see I had to knock a little piece off because it was kind of cracked and it wasn't really pertinent to the strength of the wood. But I've got my clamps down here and measure. They say measure twice, cut once. Because once you cut, you're stuck with whatever you did. It's something I learned a long time ago. My first real exposure to a lot of this construction stuff, my next door neighbor, he was a contractor growing up, and I did some work for him when I was younger. And of course, this is the kind of saw he used because he was very old school. He was an older guy, but he also had very, very heavy duty contractor quality tools. That's one that he had. So that there is just an extra piece of wood that I'm not going to, I may use it for something in the future. So I'm just sort of tossing that off to the side or laying it down actually because it's a big piece of wood. So that there is the result of my measurements, and it's the same height as the other leg. And now I'm going to see how that works, see how that fits. And I'm going to, probably the rest of the video mostly is taken up by cleaning, by sanding, by tearing off excess bark that will fall off eventually. And because this bark it's old. It's an old piece of, it was an old tree. And it's going to serve my needs really well here because it has so much beauty.